Sunday's gospel is that famous story of the road to Emmaus from Luke's gospel. And that particular story has some of the saddest emotion-laden words in all of the scriptures. We had hoped. We had hoped. We'd hoped that our career would have turned out differently. We'd hoped that our marriage would have survived the loss of a child. We'd hoped that our grandchildren lived closer so we could see them more often. We'd hoped that our daughter had not fallen into the wrong crowd and gotten involved with drugs and wound up in prison. We had hoped. And in today's world with the COVID-19 pandemic, there are other hopes that have been dashed. We'd hoped that we'd be able to give Mom a final farewell before she died. We'd hoped that our business would have made it through this pandemic. We'd hoped that our jobs would have been saved. We'd hoped that this all would have passed so much more quickly. Well, the two disciples, the two followers of Jesus on the road from Jerusalem to Emmaus, a village about 7 miles away, begins with these same powerful words. We had hoped. They'd hoped that Jesus was the Messiah promised by the prophets. They'd hoped that this man, Jesus, who they'd put all their faith into, was in fact the Messiah. They'd hoped that their investment of following him for 3 years would have paid off. And they had hoped that his reign would be glorious, never imagining it would end as it did on a cross. And they were discussing these hopes gone awry when they encountered a stranger, a person they did not recognize, on the road. And the stranger listened to them and then put their hopes into a faith-filled context. He gave them a history lesson of the prophetic buildup of the Old Testament to Jesus. He reminded them that this is what Jesus had talked about, that he would die, but that the stone which the builders rejected would become the cornerstone. He would rise and continue to live. Well, the two disciples coaxed the stranger into coming with them to their dwelling place in Emmaus, and they sat down at table. And while there, the stranger took some bread, a loaf of bread. He took it, he blessed it, he broke it, and he gave it to them. And they remembered Jesus had done that at the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. They remembered that Jesus did that exact same thing at the Last Supper, and they recognized the stranger as Jesus the Christ, and their eyes were open to his true identity. What about us? Do we recognize the Christ in our midst? Do we recognize the Christ in our son or daughter who needs help with online homework? Do we recognize the Christ in the person next door who needs groceries delivered? Do we recognize the Christ in the grocery clerk or the person stocking the shelves? Do we recognize the Christ in the farmer who's growing our food, or in the first responders, or in the other healthcare workers? Do we recognize the Christ in these people in our midst and on our journey? We had hoped, yes, we had hoped. But we are challenged to recognize the risen Christ in the ordinary journey of this Easter season and in the ordinary events and journey of our lives. God bless you.